Coach Haywood, it is such an honor to have you back on the Lynch with a Leader podcast.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Mike. It seems like, I don't know, 3 years ago when we did the first one, and it was a great pleasure to be with you. And I had a lot of people that have talked to me about that podcast. Just they would call in, even people here from other places say, "Hey, I caught that podcast." And they really enjoyed you and I guess some of my answers because they called in to say a few words about it. But yeah, I had a great time with it. I was blessed during the podcast.
Well, you are so kind, and I am so excited. Here you are. You're entering year 49 as a head coach. When you started, did you ever dream you would be in it this long? Was that even a thought?
It wasn't a thought. It was just something that I knew I wanted to do.
Mm.
Had a passion for it, and of course, as we've talked before, that passion kind of grew into purpose.
That's right.
And at some point, you just get lost in that purpose, and it becomes something very special to you. And then the years just start going by. And the next thing you know, you've done, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, and you say, man, I've been doing this a long time. And you look back and you say, well, but what else would I do? And though I have some other interests and things that, I'm branching out, I guess, a little bit, trying to speak a little bit more, maybe train with some of the things that I've learned through coaching. This is my vehicle. This is my purpose in life. This is where I think I'm going to reach people because I understand it. I understand what coaches do. I understand players. I understand parents. Everybody says they're different today. To a certain extent, yes, but not that much. I think the same desires, same needs, and so forth are there. But yeah, doing it this long, when I first started, I just wanted to get out and play that next game. I wasn't thinking about 40 or 50 years down the road.
That is amazing. It really is amazing. You got a sign that hangs in your weight room. If you see a man on the top of a mountain, chances are he didn't like there. He had to climb. There's a reason that hangs there. What does that quote say to you? And it really drove a lot of the purpose and passion behind this new book. Talk to me about that quote that hangs there.
Yes, it really says a lot to me, and it says a lot to our team. We're always talking with our kids about, you got to climb the mountain, and we live in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky, and as I said in the preface that they may not be as large a mountain range or as steep as the Smokies or the peaks of the Rockies or that type of thing, but they're plenty steep. You try to climb one, you're going to be out of breath in about 5 minutes because they're almost straight up and down. And we played in them. We grew up in them. And now we may not hike quite as much as we used to. Four-wheelers are a little more common. Yeah. But people still understand these hills, and they understand that to start at the bottom, to get to the top, it's tough. I mean, you just don't get there. You don't land on top of a mountain. I'm sure you could take a plane, somebody could drop you off, but you can't find a landing strip here hardly. I mean, there's just not that much flat land. So when we start talking, especially in our area, but I think it's also true in other places, that when you climb a mountain, you're in for a journey. You're not in for a one quick fix thing to get there. You're going to slip, you're going to slide, you're going to fall down, you're going to get bumps and bruises. Things are going to happen along the way. And the only way you get to the top is to fight through the adversity, to be persistent and get yourself in a mindset that it's not going to happen today. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but somewhere out there, if I just keep climbing, eventually I can get to the top.
Do you think that's where the instant culture we live in really works against us, that we just want to get there fast and get there quick? Do you see that as a reason a lot of people just don't last on the mountain?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've got as you said, an instant microwave kind of culture. We want it, and we want it fast. And if we can't get it fast, well, let's go jump and do something else. But there's still a lot to be said for those people, whether it's in athletics or business or entrepreneurs, who just get in there and keep swinging every day. I like to use the analogy of Michael Jordan. And, everyone knows who he is, and we all know the game-winning shots that he took. but he also says, how many did I miss?
That's
I
right.
had to keep shooting, and he kept shooting. And eventually, he made those shots.
Mm.
He didn't let that deter him from achieving his goal, which ultimately was a championship. Babe Ruth was the same kind of guy. He kept swinging.
Mm.
People don't remember how many times he struck out, but he kept swinging. And of course, he was the all-time home run champion for many, many years,
Yep.
and still looked on, I guess, in his era as the all-time champion. But he struck out a bunch of times.
That's
But you
right.
don't do that unless you keep swinging. And the principle's the same. You got to keep climbing. You just don't give up because you fail. You don't give up because you fall down. You don't give up because something happens in your life. And the culture in our society today says, go home,
Mm. Mm.
try something different, try a new spouse, try anything. If it's tough, get out of it. And what I've always believed, and one of the things that I really like about athletics, and especially football, is that when you get knocked down, you got to get back up.
That's
And the
right.
one thing about this sport is you are going to get knocked down.
Mm.
That's a part of it. And when you learn to get back up and realize that you're not injured and that you got to get over your ego, and you start playing for something that's a little bit bigger than you, then you have a chance not only to climb a mountain, to go on a journey, but you're going to do it not just with yourself, but you're going to do it with a group of other people.
Mm.
And I've always believed leaders, when true leaders, don't just climb the mountain and get up on top by themselves. They bring other people with them.
That's
And that's
right.
what leadership is about.
You look and you sit there, you've 472 wins in 48 seasons. How many state championships have you won now?
8.
8 state championships. How many years were you in coaching as a head coach before you won your first state championship?
I think about 29.
During that time, were there some seasons you went, I don't know if I want to stay on this mountain. I don't know if what I'm doing's working. How were you feeling about year 27 when you're like, all right, my tenure, I'm getting a little long in the tooth here to earn what I want to ultimately achieve. How was the climb for you during that time?
Well, you got to keep things in perspective. And that's difficult to do, especially in the coaching world, because there are certain expectations. You're supposed to win some games. You're supposed to have some success. You got to keep your job, so to speak. But there's more to it than that. And by keeping things in perspective, you talk about making a difference in kids' lives. Are you teaching them the right things? Are they learning values? Are they being able to carry that over into their adult lives? And if you're doing those things, that's the big picture. But then the other picture is your own personal goals, your own personal drive, the things that you want your team to achieve, and you get close. And we got close so many times. My first, not my first year, but my second and third year at Belfry, we were in the state championship game. I said, man, we're rolling now. And I didn't know that it was going to be another 17 years before we were in another championship game. And once we got back, it was like we kind of knew what to do.
Yeah.
We won that one. It was in overtime, and we didn't play all that well, but we did what we needed to do to win it. But during that stretch, I was thinking, is this going to, like you said, is it going to happen? And what do I need to do to get better? And that gets into improvement. But there's nights I went home with these end of season losses. You lose in overtime, you lose by 1 point, all the things that can almost get you there. There was a couple of 3 years there where we lost maybe in the semifinals, and the team that we lost to by a point, or one of those just edge of your seat games, went on and won by 30 points in the state championship game. And those things kind of stick with you.
Yep.
And you say, man, how many more of these can I go through? Are we ever going to be able to pull this through? So you got to balance that feeling of failure, the feeling that you're always coming up short, with the greater good, you might say, of what coaching really is. And coaching is being able to continue to climb the mountain, to keep taking a group every year from the bottom, and you go as far as you can with them, with the abilities that you have. That's what God wants us to do. to get the best of the abilities that he's given us. And if we can do that, that's what success is. The
right.
championships are really nice. There's no doubt about that. That means that you've truly put it on paper. You've taken the abilities, the best that you can do, and you've executed well enough with the talents that you've been given to culminate a state championship. But there's a balance. And there's been days, nights, especially end of years, that I walked out of this hall that I live in and said, I can't do this anymore.
I cannot imagine how many trips up into the holler you're thinking, I don't know if I'm coming back out tomorrow morning or not. But you
Yeah,
did.
I think we all have conversations with the Lord about things like that. And
That's right.
and I walk out doing the talking and kind of arguing, and I, can't do it. And by the time I'm walking back, there's tears in my eyes and saying I've kind of come around, and I'll be saying, I'll do what you want me to do. And that's coach football.
That's so good. Well, what I love about this, and I want to unpack a couple of the chapters in the book. I'm imagining we're standing at the base of the mountain, Coach, and my wife's from Charleston, West Virginia, so I'm familiar with the mountains of that region for our drives up to West Virginia when she was living up, when her folks still lived up that way. I can imagine us standing at the bottom with some young coaches, some young leaders, and you turning to them going, all right, we're starting this hike, and the first thing you guys have got to get is vision. And I don't care if it's a business, I don't care if it's a sports team, vision matters. Why is vision so critical to the work you're going to do climbing that mountain?
Well, I'm going to sum this up in a quote that I heard somewhere along the line, but you got to see the invisible before you can do the impossible.
Right.
I'll say that again in case somebody misses this. You have to see the invisible before you can ever do the impossible. And to me, that sums up what you just asked me. Yeah, there's steps to vision. There's a process to improving your vision, to finding how to go about your vision. But yeah, you got to see it. You got to see what you want before you can ever reach what you want. And your vision, yeah, it comes from your mental aspect, but I think it's a lot deeper than that, because I think within each one of us, there's a seed, and it's real small, and it's put there by our creator, and it's put there long before we ever know what the word vision means, maybe before we can ever see that vision, that it's going to be our guide to our life. And when that vision comes to fruition, when it comes to the point where we start to see the plane and the area that we are supposed to go in life, then we kind of come on the same plane as the original idea that was placed in us from the very beginning. That, yeah, these are your talents, these are your abilities. Now, what's this vision that you have? What's this stuff out here that you can really go and grab? Then you start putting the pieces together to the vision. But I've always thought the vision comes first. And I think the first part of it is being able to recognize that, to be able to, I talk about this later in the book about thinking big big thoughts, because those thoughts start from inside, and they all start with that vision of who you are, who you can become, what you were designed to do. I think vision's huge. I've given talks on this in the past, and I can spend an hour talking about vision, but I think it's so important to understand not just having a dream, but where the essence of that dream comes from. It's bigger than we are.
That's exactly right. And you talk about it. You talk about it in there about paying the price. What does the price look like that you have to pay to have a vision and help execute that vision?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned paying the price, and that is definitely one of the points that you have to do, that you have to pay the price. And I was having lunch with a couple of gentlemen today, and one of them mentioned that very fact, is that if you're going to be successful, you have to pay a price. And you mentioned our society today, many people wanting to jump from one thing to another. If I don't have success here, well, I'll just go try here. the thing is, to have success, there's always a price to pay. When you climb the ladder of success, you got to give up some things.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter what profession you're in, you have to give up to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of some of the issues that we run into, I think, in society, that everybody wants this quick fix, and they want everything. And it doesn't work that way. You got to give up some things. You don't get it all.
That's right.
We like to think we do, but you just don't get it all. So you got to choose the best things, the most important things, and then you're going to have to sacrifice some other things. But you do, sacrifice comes in a lot of forms. Sometimes it's with your time, especially with coaching. Coaches give up a lot of time.
Yep.
You give up, Mike, a lot of your time with your family just to be able to be in ministry, to be able to do the things that you do, because sometimes that's going to call you first.
Yep.
And you say, I got to go.
That's
I've got
right.
to do what I have to do. Coaches do the same thing. A kid needs a ride home. I got a call, and this is not unusual for coaches. I got a call from one of our store owners and said, I got a kid down here that says he needs a ride home. I don't mind taking him, but I don't want to make sure he's one of your players. And I said, you don't want to take him home. He lives pretty far out. I said, I'll be right there. But that wasn't my plan for the afternoon.
That's right.
But you give up your time. And so, I had to leave to do that. Any of my coaches would do that. Any of the coaches listening on this podcast would do that. So it's not uncommon what we would do in those circumstances. And I think that's true in any profession. But you kind of got to know, what you give up for success. And so success, again, my definition is doing the best you can do with the abilities that God gives you. It's not about dollars and cents. It's not about victories. It's not about championships. It's about making a difference in people's lives. So if you help a kid get home, you get them a ride home. Well, that's our duty. That's our calling, is to help other people. So we got to be careful with our vision and are paying the price, that we got to pay the price for the right things. And that's where we have to really understand what vision is and where it truly comes from, and keep things in perspective, keep our priorities straight.
What have you had to grow in most in that area? Because I think every young coach, every young leader starts out, they would say, oh, I've got a great vision for what I want to do. What's been the area that God's really had to stretch you, Coach, when it comes into the vision area?
I don't know. He had to stretch me in a lot of ways. But I think a lot of us, many times with our vision and our dream, there's a couple of parts to this. Number one, I think sometimes we don't think big enough. We don't aim high enough. I think we've got a great big God, and he wants us to think big, dream big, because he's that big that he can accommodate our dreams. But I think the second part of this, and kind of back to your question, is sometimes we get too much with the worldly kind of dream, about the wins, the championships, the money, the prestige, that we look at that as our dream, and our dream needs to be bigger than that. And I think that's what maybe God really has opened my eyes to. And I was fortunate as a young coach that I had some things that happened to me as a young coach that helped me see the real importance of coaching, about making a difference in kids' lives. I've always had a pretty good understanding of that. But, I had an injury to a player, and it really opened my eyes that, hey, if you're going to do this, this has to be bigger than just going out and winning a game, because you're talking about serious stuff here when you talk about kids having injuries and lives and things like that. And all coaches go through similar circumstances. You're going to have issues with families, illnesses, even deaths in families, and we have to go through those things. So we got to say, what really is your vision? Is it really just to win a championship? Is that your dream? Well, yes, that can be a part of it. But I think the bigger vision is, what do your kids learn while they're fulfilling that vision? But better yet, what do they learn if they don't get that part of it?
That's
What do they
right.
learn when you get knocked out of the playoffs in the first round, or you have a very mediocre season? And I've always felt like, and I've said this publicly on numerous occasions, there are a lot of great coaches that have great seasons and do just as much as maybe I've done in a championship year.
Mm,
They've gone 5-6.
that's right.
But their kids learn great lessons and values about life. And they're going to carry those forward 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And the record is not going to make that much difference when they're 40 years old.
That's exactly
So,
right. And I love that, Coach, because the culmination, we all have something we're stretching for and shooting for. That's great. But the success and the real journey is the climb. It's what happens day by day. And that's what your next chapter is, getting a little bit better each day. So as you are turning, as we're climbing up this mountain together, we've got these young leaders around us, and you're talking to them about getting a little bit better each day. What does that look like for you? You're in year 49 as a head coach. You surely have learned all there is to learn about being a leader, being a coach. How do you continue to get a little better each day?
well, Mike, I guess the best way to put that is that you never get there.
That's right.
You never get there. And if every day you'll take a step up the mountain, it kind of keeps you from getting to the point that you've arrived.
Mm.
And if you ever do get to the top, find you another mountain. That's the best I can say. Find you another mountain to climb,
I love it. I love
because you
it.
got to keep going. But yeah, that's what it's kind of looked like in my life. I've never thought, me personally, that I've had great creative skills in the game, or come up with all these imaginative things that your other coaches do. I just think I've been pretty persistent, and I've tried to do the little things right and do them every day, and try to take a team at the beginning of the year and just really emphasize those little things, which is one of the chapters too.
Right.
The little things, and do them better every day. And we just had a week of practice where I wasn't real pleased with our progress, and kind of got after our guys a little bit one evening, and we talked about getting better each day, and being able to compete. And you can't get better sitting on your duff. You
That's
can't
right.
get better going through the motions. I mean, getting better each day is really difficult to do. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, because you have to do it with great intentionality, and to do it in an individual's life. And you asked about me personally, some of the things that I try to do. I think there's 4 or 5 areas in our life we have to look at. You know, we look at our health, we look at our relationships, our spirituality, our faith, our career, you know, our different skills. So we've got to be aware of all of these areas of our life, and we have to address those. We can't just look at one area and let the others go, because, you know, that, I don't know how many I laid out there, but 20% is not going to get you very far.
That's
You know,
right.
address each one to be the complete person that we were created to be. So if I can spend a little time each day from a spiritual standpoint, and I try to read my Bible in the morning before I go to work. It might not be much, but it's going to be a little bit. Spend a little time with the Lord. Let them keep my relationship strong there. If I can spend a little time at night before I go to bed, maybe reading a leadership book, or a manual, or personal growth book, something to help develop me as a person, then I think I'm going to be able to pass that on to our kids. And at some point during the day, you know, maybe I can put on one of these videos, or talk with one of my coaches about a technique or a scheme, learn some about my profession, my skill, and every day do something like that. Because I'm a big believer that if you can pour something into your life every day, good things in your life every day on a daily basis, and you think about this, 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, doesn't sound like much, but 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, you can take off for Thanksgiving and Christmas, have a little vacation there. That adds up to 43-hour work week.
Mm, mm.
And I really believe that if you could do that, I think that can make a big difference in your life.
Yep. I
And that's
totally,
intentional. It won't just happen. You have to literally sit down and say, here's what I'm going to do with that 10 minutes.
mm,
And you might do 3 things on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and 3 things on, 2 things on Tuesday and Thursday. And then you gradually do that. But you start doing that. Now think about this. What if you did that for 10 years?
mm.
What if you did it for 20 minutes a day for 10 years? You're going to be a different person. You'll be changed. Part of it because of the self-discipline, part of it because of the intentionality, but a big part of it is because of the things that you're pouring into you. You're going to grow as a person. When you grow as a person, everything else is going to grow around you. And that's what getting a little better each day is all about. It's all
You and
about,
I are both big John Maxwell fans, and he talks about the law of the lid, and you talk about that in that chapter. How can leaders become lids for both players, coaches, and the teams that we lead, even in the work environment? How do leaders, in your vantage point as you've lived out this leadership journey, how can leaders become lids for those people around them?
well, they can become a lid positively or negatively.
That's good.
And a positive leader will raise the lid for the people around them by raising their own lid. About the same thing I'm talking with you about. Yep. That they continue to grow, they continue to increase their abilities, mental, physical, spiritual. And as they do that, as your lid goes up, and I try to give an illustration in the book, and John Maxwell does it a lot better than I do. But you take this lid and you're sitting right here and everyone's underneath you, because followers can't outgrow the leader.
Right.
But if your lid grows, then those people underneath you are going to grow along with you. But the negative side of that is, if you take this lid and you lay it right in here and it's sitting there, if you don't grow, they can't either.
Yep.
And one of 2 things happens. They get stagnate. Their morale will go down. And I see this. If you do this long enough, you're going to see it. And then the second thing, you could lose that, or they're going to leave you. They're going to go looking for another position somewhere where they can grow and fulfill their potential. So it's kind of a 2-way thing. If you grow, your people underneath you will grow. And I've seen this in business. I've seen it in ministry. I've seen it in education, superintendents, principals, teachers. People get to a certain age and they kind of start leveling off. Well, they don't just level off. You're either climbing or you're rolling backwards in life.
That's exactly
so
right.
You can't sit still. And if you can't just fade out. If you do, you're going to slide out and you're going to slide down. And I really believe you got to keep pushing the envelope as long as you're actively in this world. You might retire from a job, but you never really retire from life. You never retire from life. And we need to be out there doing what we can do to make a difference in people's lives.
You do such a great job in one of the chapters, Coach. And so we've talked about vision. We've talked about doing the little things every day, but you talk about character and you make a statement. Vision without character will leave you stuck on the side of the mountain. Character doesn't matter till it matters. And when it matters a lot. Why is character and integrity the foundation for a leader as they take a team or a company up that mountain?
Well, I think at some point you're going to be faced with situations, and having something to base your decisions on. And that's your character. That's your foundation. That's your integrity. That's kind of who you are. And you don't always make the right decision. Doesn't mean you have bad character, but at least you're giving it the best thought. You're trying to do the right thing. And I'd be the first to say I made thousands of mistakes. I don't think they were intentional, but I probably made quite a few mistakes. But I've learned over the years that try to encompass that with who you are spiritually, morally as a person. And many times when I'm faced with a decision, I've learned, and I'll tell young coaches this: don't feel like you're on an island. Don't feel like you need to do it on your own. If you've got a mentor, I strongly suggest, if you don't, find one Find someone that you can talk with, someone older, wiser, smarter than you, and someone that doesn't mind stepping on your toes. You need people like that in your life. And as you get older, it may be more difficult to find them,
Mm,
but I still have those people in my life
mm,
because I say, hey, I've got a situation. What's your thoughts on this? And great mentors don't tell you what to do, but they'll guide you in the right direction where it will help you make better decisions. And I think some of the biggest mistakes I made probably in my career, early especially, was I didn't make that call. I had mentors, but I thought being the head coach, I had to make that decision on my own, and I didn't include anybody else. Now, well, I may ask 10 people.
mm,
I'll ask my
mm.
coaching staff. I'll make a couple of calls. I said, man, I got to get this right. And I don't feel that pressure of I got to be the man, so to speak. I can just go ahead and ask people with that. And the character and your integrity comes in, and you need to hear from other people sometimes and make sure you're doing the right thing. I think the other thing sometimes we get into is we get influenced by our superiors.
Mm.
And I've had that happen to me a couple of times too, where, I wasn't sure if that was the right thing to do. And yet my bosses said it was. And I said, I may have gone along with it. And I've come back and I'd say, I don't know if that was right or not. And I think as you get older, you get a little stronger. And I say something to the effect, there's a quote that character is made in the small moments of
That's
life,
right.
sometimes through mistakes and sometimes not. But you keep developing that. And the older you get, the stronger you get, the better foundation you have with your morals, your values, and the things that you need to be able to make the proper decisions and live your life, the way it should be lived. But I think the biggest thing with character is that you have to have something to base it on. Where's it going to come from? Where do your values come from? Or do they come from your parents? Do they come from somebody you watch on a podcast? Where do you base those from? And I was very fortunate as a young person to have two Christian parents. As they say, they drug me to church every Sunday. They made sure I was there, even when I didn't want to be. And when I got older, at a certain point in time, young in college, I kind of faded away. I said, I'm old enough. I don't want to go anymore. But they say train up a child in the way he should go. And it did take me long to get back in there and know that that was where I needed to be. And then it was on my own terms, not necessarily the parents' terms. So I encourage parents and coaches to, I don't know if the word force is the right word or not, but influence
Yeah.
young people to find a place where they can find values that don't change. Our society allows values to go with whatever the flow is. Today's values, well, they're good today, but tomorrow they may change. But I've found that the values in the Bible are pretty rock solid, and you can build your character upon that. And it may not cover every single situation, but it gives you some pretty good guidelines. As I said, I'm not perfect. I've made plenty of mistakes along the way and things like that. But I think the one thing I've tried to do is follow some value-based principles, and they have been from a faith-based background.
You made a quote in that chapter. It was really good. And you talked about characters and inner toughness or resilience that allows you to fight back. And you talked about Joseph from scripture. I don't know if anybody hit more dead ends, hurdles, knocked down, forgotten than poor old Joseph. What is it about Joseph's life that motivates you to be what he was in spite of the circumstances he had to walk through?
Well, there's two things that really stand out about Joseph to me. And one of those is when he was a youngster, I think he's like a lot of us. He made some mistakes. I think he may have had a little attitude about him, maybe a little arrogant, came across wrong to people. And that probably is what got him into some trouble to begin with. But that's also a good message for us that, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. And boy, he finished good.
He sure did.
And he had every reason in the world to be angry at his brothers at the end, all those things that happened to him along the way, being thrown in prison and being accused wrongly, even when he was doing the right thing. But his faith, he stayed in the game.
Mm.
You know, he didn't leave the game just because things were going against him. He didn't turn against God. He didn't quit climbing that mountain. He didn't give up as he was going through his life. And I think those are the things that really have always intrigued me about Joseph. With all the things, you know, there's a lot of space between the verses,
Yeah,
years
that's right.
that went
That's
through
right.
there. You know, you can tell the story pretty quick. You can read it probably in 5 minutes, but those were years that went by where he was in prison, years where he was kind of enslaved before he got into Potiphar's house and so forth. And yet he persisted. He had great determination.
Mm.
He had great faith. And I think those three things can take you a long way in life when things aren't going your way.
You talk about one of the traits in this climb of the mountain is leadership. If I were to stop you on the mountain, we've got that group of coaches and leaders around us, and I say, okay, coach, what does a great leader look like to you? Take out what role it is. They may have a hat on a sideline. They may be a tie on in the office or a pastor of a church. What is a great leader to you? What would you say?
Well, that's a great question. Great question. A great leader, I think, is someone that has the ability to inspire others to accomplish things they never thought possible. Maybe to do things they never dreamed. They influence others to go above and beyond. And they do it in their own way. Everybody's a little bit different. You know, some people are up front, they're flashy, they've got all that charisma. Other people do it very quietly. But it's not about your personality, it's about your influence. And John Maxwell, as you know, says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And it's so true. Great leaders influence others to do things that they never believed they could do. That's what leadership is. We get so caught up in leadership as being a person that stands up in front of a room and gives speeches, or is the boss, or is always in charge. That's totally wrong. Leaders are people that influence, and you do that in so many ways. And yeah, sure, you occasionally have to get up and give a talk or something like that, but you get people to do things for you because they want you to. I had a principal, Frank Welch, when I first came to Belfry. I've never met anyone like him since then or before then, but he had a way of getting you to do things that you didn't necessarily want to do. You go in ready to say no, and when you walked out, whatever you want, Mr. Welch. If you want me to run through that wall, I'll do it. I'll run to the top of the hill. He was that kind of guy, and he always had this great persona about him. He was friendly. And he always made you feel good about yourself. One of those guys that went around always tearing people down. He was a builder. He built people up, and he had great relationship skills. He really had good people skills. And I'll back up to your vision question. He was a visionary too. Now he thought above and beyond. He had big pictures of things. But anyone that was around him knew that same thing. They said he was one of a kind. Parents would go in so upset about some event, something going on with their kid, and they'd be walking out, big smiles on their faces and hugging him. And, he was just that kind of guy.
Yeah.
He could just handle about any situation and let it roll off his back too. He didn't worry about a whole lot, But I think that's what leaders do. They influence others, and they solve problems. They do all those things. But the big thing is they influence and they motivate.
You have so many great chapters in the book, Coach. You talk about failure to success, passions, what gets you going, purpose keeps you going. But I got a final question for you. And this book is so good. We're going to have links in the show notes for everybody to order a copy. Coaches, leaders, you need to order copies for your office. This is a must read for anybody that is in athletics, anybody in leadership. if I were to interview these generations of young men that have climbed this mountain with you, they've had Belfry on their chests, they've worn their leather jackets. Some have won championships, some haven't. Some have celebrated from the stand, some have celebrated from the sidelines, but they've all climbed a mountain with you. What do you want them to say about the journey up the mountain with Coach Haywood? Looking back on it, what do you want them to say about that journey?
I would hope that they would say that they learned lessons that they could carry over into their life, and it started making sense to them. And that's the response that I get from most of them when they come back and talk to me.